Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the CONVO cast. I am Fiorella Isabel, and I have a very special show today. We have been waiting a long time to be able to listen to the many experiences of many of the Sanders campaign surrogates, volunteers, and supporters, as well as the staffers. And here with me today, I have Melissa Michelson. Melissa Michelson was a field organizer for the District 27 in Los Angeles. Melissa, thank you for being here today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we're gonna get right into it because I'm gonna start off by sharing a little bit of what people have been sharing and sharing their grievances so far. I want to share a little bit of that and get your opinion on it. So, according to many of us, not just myself, but you and many other Sanders volunteers and surrogates and staffers, the Sanders campaign was primarily run, at least at the very top, by high paid mercenary establishment, political consultant types. And this entire time, it was difficult for people to know this, and they didn't want to come out with the stuff. One, you had a contract you couldn't violate. Two, there was also a lot of fear that it would hurt Bernie Sanders and the campaign. We didn't want to bring any more negativity into the campaign. And one of the things I want to show the first part of this thread because it's a giant thread. We're not going to go over the whole thing. You guys can read it for yourself, but it is on my Twitter. And one of the things I want to start by showing is Scott Dakota's comments. Now, Scott is an organizer I've known about for about 5 years. He's a burner, OG burner. And he talks about the gigantic grassroots activist organizer army that were the actual strength of the campaign had they been utilized, had been holding their tongues about being systemically mistreated, abused, and pushed away by the official campaign staff. And he goes on to say also that organizers weren't telling these stories in public in real time for fear it would hurt Bernie's chances of winning, even despite the increasing fear that the campaign was being deliberately hobbled and sabotaged from the inside. But now it's over, and the held back stories are now starting to emerge into a trickle, and it's likely this trickle will turn into a flood in coming weeks. If you have a story to tell, now is the time. If you want to collate stories and make sense of why things went so tragically wrong, keep an ear out and start doing your research. A lot of professional mercenary consultants in the Sanders campaign spent their time with their eyes primarily on lining up their next big money gigs after their anticipated or perhaps planned failure of the Sanders campaign. Some of those people are now landing with Team Biden or the DNC or general establishment Dem Party gravy train gig pool, or are studying up new consulting and media services for hire or super PACs, and we're going to talk about that later. Keep an eye out for who lands with their feet up, big money post Sanders consulting, and who ends up in favor with the corporate Dem establishment. That will tell you just who was in it to cash in on the movement and why, and who was not in it for the values and ideals of the progressive movement. And finally, I just want to point out one of the people I do know, Meg Lay. She said her experience with the Bernie 20 campaign was awful. I felt used, belittled, and alienated. I know I'm not the only one who had bad experiences with the campaign. I didn't speak up about my experience because I didn't want it to hurt Bernie's chance of being our nominee. Now that the campaign has been suspended, we should have transparency and talk about what went wrong so progressives can learn from the problems we had. So, Melissa, let's just start
Yes.
by I'm sure you have a lot to say. I just want to start by talking about your experience in the LA campaign as a field organizer, and specifically related to your direct higher up, which was, I believe, Lewis Myers.
Yeah. That's all really interesting how people, have had the same or similar negative experiences with the campaigns from across the country. And specifically, I can obviously just speak for Los Angeles, but I agree with Meg in that it is high time that we are able to speak out and let people know what an oppressive space that was to work in. Again, now everything I'm saying is pretty much just from my perspective, but my hope is that we can, like she said, learn from these things, keep an eye out for people, and you know, if they're all about getting jobs now, I feel like anybody who is going to be working under them needs to be fully aware of what it's like, and anybody who's going to be hiring them needs to be fully aware of their management, their decisions, their lack of organization, etc. But in any case, yeah, it was rather difficult to work in the Los Angeles main office. And one more thing, just like as a caveat, I don't want to say that this is about Bernie Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, for whatever reason, I know it was a huge organization, but for whatever reason, these people got hired, and these types of managers got hired. It was from the top, they were kind of, it was like all the same. And then when you got to the bottom, field organizers, my level, and slightly above my level, regional field directors, that level, we were basically, most of us were activists, we're organizers and that kind of thing. Some people desperately wanted to pursue their career in organizing, paid job. This was my first paid organizing gig. And so what I feel that, was it Scott and Meg failed to mention, is one reason why people didn't come out to speak is, yes, we didn't want to hurt the Bernie campaign, but also they were afraid. There was a major fear factor going on. They always dangled, even before we got hired, you know, they dangled jobs in front of us, like you have to kind of not kiss ass, but you're obviously not going to be able to come out and speak out about what's going on, because they wanted to be, once they were employed, they wanted to go to get redeployed and go further and go to the next state. So there was just a hush around the office in terms of speaking out, if people had indeed wanted to speak out. Now, some people also were brought in by these mercenaries, as was described, from previous jobs. And, you know, some of us were like, where do these people come from? Are they progressive? Does it matter? I mean, I don't know.
So real quickly, though, can you just tell
yes.
me about that specifically? Because some people were brought in, you say. I recall during the summer in 2019, when we had started the grassroots efforts with the rallies and stuff, people were brought up into being the barnstorm people that would lead the barnstorm. And there were several activists in our community, including Michelle Manos and Carlos Marroquin, that were pretty much put out there as you as well, to be the face of the grassroots. So it seemed like, oh, okay, the Bernie Sanders campaign is actually pulling from the grassroots. But then when it came time to actually bring them as hires, that didn't happen. Now, some of the things that were cited were lack of experience, but the people they put in their place had no experience. So that didn't, you know, see fit. And also, I just want to make sure that people understand, these aren't people that are disgruntled employees or disgruntled people who didn't get hired. We're going to get to the bottom of how the volunteers in the grassroots were pushed out and also not used effectively to bring out the vote for Bernie Sanders. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was frankly, with the field organizers, we each had one district. Some congressional districts had 2 people per district, but it didn't seem like a rhyme or reason. It seemed like there was a mix of hardcore Bernie-crats like myself, with organizing experience and or connections into the community. And then there was another batch of people that they brought in, that Lewis and Danny brought in, like that worked with them, or that was currently working with them, or who was being mentored by them, etc. So it was really, it almost felt like 50-50. And it didn't, I mean, I was also a volunteer under them for many, many months. I wouldn't say under them, but for the Bernie campaign. I mean, before the Bernie campaign even landed here in Los Angeles, I had been organizing. I even started a grassroots office. I started an office in Highland Park. We dropped everything locally for Bernie Sanders as soon as he announced back in February.
Yeah.
So leading up onto all of that, and then I will get to what you're saying about the treatment of the grassroots. We were happily organizing for Bernie as soon as he announced, and then the campaign hire staff got hired in June, and we heard that nobody knew these people really, because there's a disconnect between Bernie activists and organizers and progressive organizers on the ground in the LA area with the kind of the ones that organize for unions or politicians and have that whole experience. And that's who they picked for our bosses, so to speak. And so they started hiring in June. And then I don't know what went on other than, the grassroots activists like Carlos and Michelle, and they were like bringing these kind of outsiders to the Bernie circles to us and meeting, like introducing everybody. And there was one big meeting at Philippe's, I remember, and it was kind of like, an intro. Mm-hmm. And then we waited to be called on and tried to, I was ecstatic that they were finally here. And I thought, oh, great, we're going to be, there's going to be a grand organizational scheme, and I'm going to be helping doing because that's what I did before as a super volunteer in 2016. I was a super volunteer. So I was like, yeah, I got that experience. I could run a barnstorm, run volunteer, run canvas, phone banks, and whatever is needed. Well, there was really no movement. I mean, it was just like stagnation from June, July, August, September, October. Finally, one office got opened up. I don't know the reasons. I just know there was nothing. At least for as a space to work out of. So mid-October, they opened up the office. But in the meantime, they were stringing volunteers along. I think that's, but like Michelle, like Carlos, promising them jobs. I applied as well. I didn't expect much because I already knew that I was going to butt heads with Louis Myers. He already, there was an issue there. So I thought there's no way, why would I get a job at the Bernie campaign?
Right.
But I did get hired for whatever reason. I think it was a smart hire, obviously, because I worked my ass off. But in any case, I would have hired myself. But, it's kind of sad how the grassroots were shoved to the side, except like later, especially Louis and others would pay lip service to the grassroots. Right. And I think it was around the time there was a letter from the grassroots.
Right.
That came out.
Let's show this letter really quick a little bit. I'm not going to read all of it. I just want to show you can show the whole thing, but I'm going to read a little bit of it, of the first part. And this letter was, as Melissa stated, from all of the grassroots in California, not just the people that were really in it or that were trying to get hired, but this is everybody. And this letter was sent supposedly directly all the way up to Bernie Sanders. It was sent to all of the higher ups, Jade, everybody. And we really don't know what happened. Like, nothing happened as a result of this letter. It was signed by a lot of people here in the community, and it says, "We regret the need for this letter. However, the time has come to address some issues within the California Bernie Sanders campaign with seriousness of purpose. We are the California grassroots. We are the boots on the ground, building the movement for issues such as Medicare for all, Green New Deal, and solutions to homelessness, failing infrastructure, and money in politics. We are the people who fought long and hard for Senator Sanders in 2015 and 2016, and we continued the work after the election. That election was over at the local, state, and national levels. We founded Bernie groups all over the state and the country and organized them at lightning speed. We are delegates, organizers, and community leaders, many who have run for public office and party leadership and continue to do so. And then we have stuck by the senator's side through thick and thin. And when early 2019 came around, we readied our movement to show up and make sure that this time we would win California in a landslide, take the nomination, and go on to defeat Trump. And then they talk about the coalition, the enthusiasm. And then they go on to talk about how the concerns, our concern led to conversations. And those conversations among community leaders have led to this letter. The concerns we have are many, and chief among them we have listed here. Disconnect from the grassroots is one of them. And they go on to talk about the disconnect from the grassroots and the behavior of some organizers against some volunteers. One of the people that was named here is Melissa Byrne, not to be confused with this Melissa. Melissa Byrne was the LA Grassroots organizer. And she wasn't from LA. She was actually from up north. And a lot of people had various complaints about her and how she wasn't really doing anything. And it was an ineffective hire. And Rafael Navar is another one that was mentioned. He, people were excited to work with him, but he promoted a culture that I'm going to quote here because it seems so similar to what many people have said, that values the dedication, hard work, and enthusiasm that comes with community organizing. Supposedly, this is what he was going to portray, but we could not have been more wrong. He has issued clear directives to staff to not speak or work with the Bernie-crats or the grassroots on the ground. Can you specifically talk about that? Because I know there was a point where you were working and you were told you need to leave your Bernie groups. You can't associate with these people.
True. Very true. One thing, when you said, by the way, that nothing happened with this letter, I can tell you, I saw within the campaign, within the LA, actually, even with Chuck Rocha, when he showed up in December for a debate watch party, for all of a sudden, there was lip service paid to grassroots. Thank you to grassroots. Then Lewis started talking, just giving shout outs to grassroots. So people, I guess there was that sense that, the grassroots are disgruntled. So that's the only thing that I saw that occurred. However, we weren't allowed as organizers to, and the exact word that I got in a text message is associate with. And associate with, this was in reference to the Grassroots Highland Park office that I worked with. There was this grand kind of blanket decision made that every grassroots group, club, person, group of people was considered an independent expenditure and an IE. And so every time there was someone from the grassroots that wanted to participate and help out and be there and help us and do things, we were barred from working with them because of this fear of independent expenditure. And so as a Feel the Burn Democratic Club president, I was asked to take a huge step back. I had to let my vice president run it. I was involved in putting up a billboard, a Bernie billboard all over LA County. And we fundraised for that. We paid we filled out the appropriate forms. We followed FEC rules, et cetera, et cetera. I couldn't get involved in that,
Yeah.
So another example is the Bernie van. This is a perfect example. This was a couple of guys from Washington State that came down. David Crow put his band together and made an astounding space in a van, a moving office, if you will. It was beautiful. And I was like getting excited, like, ooh, when do I get my hands on that? Like I was ready to go with him and launch canvases with him. No, we were told not to. And this is like a very minute example, but it's a perfect example. One time I was holding a barnstorm in my town, in one of my areas here, and the Bernie van decided to come, and so I was torn. Like I was like, oh, crap, like, do I tell him, no, we can't work with each other because this is crazy?
Yeah.
But because I would have gotten in trouble. But so I didn't say anything. I just like, let's see what happens. So he parked the van in the front outside of the barnstorm. What am I going to say? No, you can't park on the street, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, what was beautiful about this van with lights and the Bernie sign that twisted and the music and stuff, he basically like advertised for the barnstorm. People driving by stopped the car, like literally screeched onto the brakes, stopped, got out of the car, and came into my barnstorm. And later, that person became one of my top canvassers.
Wow.
So imagine that not happening more. I mean, we desperately needed volunteers.
So isn't it counterintuitive though for like the campaign to be like, yeah, we need to get out the vote. We need to bring in as many people into Bernie's movement, not me, us. We need to grow. We need to get out, especially for younger people, and then say, and kind of break up your connections, like the networking, all the Bernie groups, all the social media outreach, all just the connections that every group had to burners. Isn't that counterintuitive? And also a 501c3 or 501c4 is a specific organization. Not a single person isn't necessarily part of that. And I think that was the excuse that they used, because when I was in other places, like when I went to Las Vegas, the Bernie van was working with the campaign there. So, I mean, I do think that was like an excuse. It just seemed like an excuse to like avoid any sort of issue, to like have control, because what I'm seeing here is that the grassroots had very little say as to how the campaign was run, and you had very little say. What happened when you tried to question these things, when you brought it up to management?
Like when I brought up, I don't remember if I personally brought up grassroots, where's the grassroots, but I feel like they thought of the grassroots just as volunteers to do what we need them to do. That's it. They were there to do what we told them to do, and that is it. And no creativity and no well, there was a giant chain of command, so it wasn't as simple as, I think it's as part of being a big organization, a big campaign, and also being especially sensitive to Bernie Sanders, and he will get ripped apart if anything goes wrong. I get that. However, and I think that's what made it hard to go up the chain. However, to cut off, it's like cutting off the nose to spite the face. Isn't that the phrase? That's what it felt like all the time. Yeah. That's what I felt like in terms of how they treated the grassroots. It's like, all right, then I guess we have to do this on our own. And I know different groups started different things. Yeah.
It was very top down.
I couldn't even use the Highland Park office anymore. I needed a space to run canvases, so I had to do it somewhere else at the park across the street. I mean, what the hell,
Yeah, it was very top down is what it seems like. And that's not like a bottom up grassroots campaign that I think Bernie Sanders should have been running. So I want to kind of address the election irresponsibility and the election integrity issue, because I remember you specifically bringing up that that there was an issue with the elections, because you saw our show and we brought it up. We said there was an issue with the elections, and sorry, I think I skipped Ed, but
that's okay. We'll get back.
And I just want to read this text from Lewis Myers, because he specifically said in this screenshot, you got in trouble in a way. You were kind of pushed like a conspiracy, that you were pushing like unsubstantiated theories. He said, "Hi team, friendly reminder, please refrain from decimating inaccurate or unverified theories online. I understand we want to help, but it actually hurts Bernie Sanders. I've been sent screenshots from campaign leadership. They're not happy. Can we please get to the finish line together by concentrating on the great work that you all are doing? If this text speaks to you, please respect Bernie and conduct yourself as an employee of the Bernie Sanders campaign. Great work today. And so he said, this is what you said, was that you were constantly told not to respond, not to ask questions during conference calls, not to post. They had screenshots of all your social media somehow. And that the image was in reference to CONVO Couch's interview with the poll worker. This day, one field organizer called the registrar's office and the Bernie hotline and got reprimanded for doing so by Shelly Jackson. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. Well, I know you did a show on, you had a poll worker who was in training come on.
Yes.
And I saw that, and because I was like, oh my God, because I'm on the field and I see what's happening, and I was extremely concerned about the vote for Bernie. After all the work we're doing on the ground, for it to just blow up on one single day because of this election integrity stuff, that is definitely a problem. So and I had also tried to warn Jarrell and Rafa. At that point, I didn't really have confidence in just sending an email to Lewis or Danny, because where is that going to go? I don't know. I just didn't have that confidence, because leading up to this point, I didn't really see the feedback coming back down. Like, we could shoot things up, but nothing, it didn't, at least people didn't get back to me. Danny was really bad at responding back and like giving an update or whatever. In any case, so even I tried to let them know, like, we're going to need some kind of intake form. This is going to be bad, So I posted on social media, on my Facebook at the time, or I don't remember, actually, I don't remember where I put it, but anyway, I put it on Facebook somewhere, and I wanted to alert people, like, isn't this disconcerting? Like, shouldn't we be concerned about this? And
you said, sorry, before I just want to, you said in a KDEM delegate group, you said, so in LA County, if anyone has recently changed their party preference or had it accidentally changed, they have to bring an ID. If not, their vote is provisional. Does that sound kosher? And then somebody said, one of the regional field directors said, Melissa, here is the message I got from Bernie staff. They prefer staff to be careful and avoid spreading rumors about voting. So someone had taken a screen cap of your Facebook comment, right?
Definitely. And that was one of the few groups I was still in. I wasn't active because very early on, we had a very long talking to from Lewis, a very almost angry talking to, that we need to scrub all our media. We have to leave all our groups. People were freaking out. We needed to go back in time and clean up everything about what we've said about any other candidate in the past. So I remember that meeting was very memorable. But I went on here because I'm sorry, this was really serious. So I thought, okay, I'm going to throw it out there. If it's true, it's true. If it's not true, what do people have to say? Isn't it better to actually, have your eyes open and be worried about something that might be coming? Maybe the details weren't exactly the correct. I don't know. But rather than, wow, thanks, Melissa, we're going to call the CONVO couch, or we're going to, or whatever. I didn't bring it up to the campaign because actually they already saw it on someone gave a screenshot to what I said. So, so rather than just look into it, that is not what happened. It was about quashing everything and the whole, we've got it. You guys stay in your place, which was the whole attitude the whole time. You stay in your lane, you focus on this, always re-diverting to, oh, we need to win. Oh, we need to have the eye on the prize. That's what Shelly Jackson told us when at the Bakersfield retreat, the whole organizing staff of California for Bernie was there, and we were extremely concerned about what's going to happen on voting day, because in our experience, it didn't go down well last time. Provisional ballots were handed out like candy for no reason, and we want to make sure that's not going to happen again. And Shelly Jackson said, everybody, she basically, well, first Jarrell said, I think it was Jarrell, I forget if it's Jarrell or Rafa or someone, one of them said, basically called us, no, I think it was Jarrell, this is a conspiracy theory. what happened last time. You guys are all worried about nothing. Basically, calm down. And then I remember Shelley Jackson running from the back of the room. We brought it up again the next day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and she ran up from the back of the room, and she's like, everybody, we've got lawyers for this. Eye on the prize. Don't worry about it. We got it. And they fucking did not have it. Not at all.
Not at all.
Back to when so they took that screenshot. Someone took a screenshot, sent it to the campaign. The campaign found out that I dared post that and share, like, hey, shouldn't we know what's going on? And then, so then Lewis, you know, that very same day, basically stopped everything like he liked to do. Everybody stop the phone, stop this, stop that, and listen to him as he tells us, basically, we have nothing to worry about, stay in your lane. And one of the field organizers, we were, you know, before he got in, we were like getting concerned, not just because of what we had heard, but because of stories from your show, but from all around, stories coming out, you know? Yeah. And there was just there was a very clear lack of direction from the campaign, an explanation about what we needed to do, and how we needed to handle things when we were asked at the doors, or what we needed to tell our volunteers about this. So in other words, so one of the field organizers, actually several of us, called the registrar's office multiple times and got different people. And we asked, what happens in this case? What's a provisional ballot compared to a conditional ballot?
Right.
And, you know, what happens when someone goes there, et cetera? We were asking questions and we would get different answers. Now, this is granted beyond our job description. I mean, It's our job description, but we were expected to just make phone calls. At this point in the campaign, our job was professional phone bankers. That was pretty much it. But in any case, what I wanted to say was, at some point, this field organizer that made the call, she called the Bernie hotline. Because I was also super curious about what happens when you call the Bernie hotline for when there's voting problems. So she called the Bernie hotline. The girl on the other end didn't seem to know anything. This is for the whole state of California. And then somehow Shelley Jackson found out and reprimanded her for doing this.
For calling the hotline.
Yes.
Okay. That doesn't make sense. So it's just counterproductive. It's counterintuitive. So I want to go over real quick. You have a picture here of the expected conduct for Bernie 2020 staff, contractors, and volunteers. Can you go over, you said something about number 12. Number 12 says, foster an open work environment when everyone feels comfortable raising questions and concerns. Do you feel like they actually embrace that rule?
Absolutely not. I mean, that, you know, it was really weird because one day, all of a sudden, and I'm going to tell you a story about what happened to me personally. Oops, I'm shaking. Sorry, earthquake. What happened to me personally, but that same exact day, I was walking into the restroom and I noticed, because it was right on the side, I noticed that someone had put a piece of blue tape on that number, and I had never seen it before. And it was really like, oh shit, we've got a problem in this office. Lewis Myers was the ones that ran that office, and he fostered the most hostile work environment I have ever in my whole life worked in. He was verbally abusive. One of the RFDs under him threatened to quit if he didn't stop what he was, the verbal abuse and attacks. Some of them were private. Some of them were very public, as I will tell you right now. You know, I had to file a union complaint against him. I don't know where that went, but it was a really difficult place to work. So one day he came out of the office screaming, out of his private office screaming. He made everybody get off the phones immediately. And he came right over to me, stood right in front of me and said, get off the phone, screaming and yelling at me. And so I got off the phone and I was phone banking like I was supposed to. And he basically started yelling at one of the regional field directors, and saying, how come your people aren't making calls and all this stuff. And it was very embarrassing. I was shaking because I have no idea why he was picking on me. But that's what he was doing. And he said some terrible things to the regional field director that really did not deserve it. And it made my stomach just turn. And so Daniel Andelon was sitting in the room, his supervisor. And by the way, so were volunteers. Volunteers saw this. This is no way to treat staff at all. This was a rage. He was raging. And so his direct supervisor and friend who brought Lewis into this whole thing, was sitting there, and I tried to talk to Danny afterwards. He evaded me 3 times. I went up to him, can we talk? Finally, a couple days later, he casually asked me, oh, didn't you want to talk? I was like, yeah, sure, let's talk. And I told Danny to keep Lewis the fuck away from me, the fuck away from any of my coworkers. If he ever fucking does that again, I would not guarantee what I would or would not do. So yeah, this was just not acceptable behavior. And so that kind of atmosphere of work, going in and day out, you never know what that guy was going to do, who he was going to be, raging against. And also most of us asked each other, when do we actually get to do our real work? Because as organizers, I thought I was paid as an organizer to actually organize. And I did, but I had to literally do that on the side when Lewis wouldn't know. I mean, for some reason, everything was like a knee-jerk reaction. First he was getting us into the mode of actual organizing and building out and so on. But then as we were started to do that whole thing got changed. Now, I don't know if that was Lewis's decision or the higher ups or whatever, right. But then we had to shift, and we just basically became professional phone bankers just for specific, special prioritized events, like 3 events in the week or whatever. And that's it, but not for my district. I wasn't really allowed to build out in my district.
You built your district out on your own time.
Yes. And so before I went to work, which was usually around 12 or 1, I had to actually do my work here I'm in my kitchen right now, but not in my garden. And before going to the office, try to get as much work as I could do. And then when I got there, sometimes I had to continue, but I would be yelled at for not making phone calls for a canvas. And at some point, and then of course, when I came home, I would work until 1 o'clock. Many of us would do the same thing.
Right.
We just never really had the time to organize. And it's just a shame, because as an organizer, I saw I wish that others were doing what I was doing. I was having, having phone banks during the week, canvases during the week, where literally the rest of the campaign were just expected to canvass on the weekends, and that's it. The rest of the time, they needed to make phone calls for Lewis's priority events, that they always wanted Lewis or whoever wanted them to be big, just optically. They wanted a lot of people there, all about the optics.
Yeah, so it seems
actually organizing.
And it seems you pointed something out, that the campaign was all about optics over action. I know when it came to an incident I had, which I will later on in a different time talk about in Iowa, it was all about the optics, how it made them look bad if they weren't effective in their role. So I want to talk about now how the strategy, and this is obviously a strategy that's from national, where the strategy was you couldn't speak about any other candidate. And initially we understood this. Everybody understood it as, okay, that's Bernie Sanders. He doesn't want to speak ill of other candidates. But it came back to bite him because we see a lot of people wanted differences between him and Biden, wanted differences between him and Warren. And there was an email that you guys were sent where during a debate party, you weren't even allowed to mention any other candidate. And it said, tonight, Bernie is participating in the Democratic presidential primary debate in Charleston. You can help Bernie win the debate by sharing your support on social media throughout the night. Below, you will find the suggested talking points, graphics, and social media language to generate excitement around the debate. Please be sure to tune into the debate and share your support. Blah, 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 blah. Then they said, as you share the campaign's message before, during, and after the debate, remember to follow Bernie's lead. Our candidate is focused on lifting the voices of working people everywhere. It is important to stay on message, focus on the issues, and share how our movement will defeat Donald Trump and change the country. It is our job to amplify what Bernie says and not to attack individual candidates. The American people are with us on the issues, and our message will break through by elevating the discussion. So they gave you suggestions as to what to say. Refrain from commenting on other candidates or staff of other candidates. Don't start fights with people. Don't get ahead of Bernie. I don't even know what that means. Follow the lead of the official campaign account. Less is always more. A lot of times saying nothing is better. This is a little bit disturbing to me. Can you speak on that?
Well, honestly, that wasn't that disturbing, that email. What was more disturbing was how that trickled down into the field organization, or about basically Lewis and Jarrell and Rafa. They were adamant about everybody just not having an opinion at all or expressing it at all when it came time to when Julian Castro dropped out, if Biden said something that was terrible, whatever. So we were basically silenced from any of that. But that email wasn't as obvious. But one time, but it permeated in the culture in the office and in the campaign. And so, like, one time I was at Debate Watch at the office. And one of the regional field directors, who's directly under Lewis, was standing next to me. I was in the back, and I think Elizabeth Warren was saying something. And like when you watch a sports match, it's like, oh, shut up, or you're yelling in the back. She basically came over to me and said, you can't do that, Melissa. You can't. And I'm just like, what? I can't even. This is insane,
Yeah.
So I mean, it's that it permeated super deep into zipping it. We had to zip it for everything, and as staff, I mean, I understand the rationale behind it. Now, however, and this was obviously a top-down decision, and now as things are coming out, we're hearing that there were, in fact, many people higher up that disagreed with this tactic and this strategy. And it's unfortunate that, and I also agree personally that Bernie should have been way stronger against Biden, gone after him, especially. I mean, I was heartbroken at the last debate. With just him and Biden, finally, just the two of them. Let's see the exact, the fine-tuned differences, or the grand differences between these two candidates. Go for it, Bernie, go. And he just dropped it. So, we know now that's not his MO. We knew before, but unfortunately he didn't take it to that level. But yeah, I mean, that was a campaign decision. So we were following that.
Of course, and you were just doing your job. I just want to point out, too, that Melissa sent her opinion on how the field organizers had to be specifically, like she said, focused on their job. That's it. And that the regional field directors would make the call for the field organizers. If the field organizers didn't do what they were supposed to do, basically it was on them. The field organizers could not create any trainings, house parties without Lewis's review. Everything depended on Lewis's review. Now, this is normal when you have a boss; they have to approve things. However, the way a grassroots campaign for Bernie Sanders was supposed to go was to be more inclusive and free of being feeling afraid for you to go to someone and be like, here's a great idea. I'm also a person with ideas. I'm also an organizer. You didn't just want to be a phone banker. And it just seemed like Lewis, and the whole campaign in general. I mean, you can only speak to the LA campaign, but in general, from my perspective, what I'm seeing is that a lot of them are run this way from national all the way down. And one thing here stuck out for me: do not waste time trying to find endorsements or chase any VIP in an industry or org unless they are a lock. This is one issue that's come up with a lot of people, how Bernie lost out endorsements because there was a lack of communication to endorsements. Did you ever feel like you couldn't reach out to somebody to try to get them to help to endorse Bernie? Did it ever feel like if you could have done that, it would have been more effective?
That I think is part of the stay in your lane. You guys are organizers. You guys need to run volunteers and run the show.
Yeah.
I think that was in reference to we're dealing with endorsements, and if somebody that might be good or wants to endorse Bernie, don't just give me some random name. Don't send them some random name, but really look into it. And I think it was in relation to that. But we weren't
Yeah.
really supposed to be dealing with endorsements. That was someone else's job, and I think that was Danny Andelon's job. How that went, I don't know. But partly, I agree. Endorsements. Well, I don't know what I agree with now, because this whole campaign is just, it threw everything on its head. But I mean, it's true, endorsements don't necessarily win elections, but I mean, this usually on the ground work wins elections, but now
Right.
this, at this point, who knows what wins elections?
Yeah, you're
So
kind of leading me
establishment
into my
wins elections.
next point, though, because you guys were the campaign. The Bernie Sanders campaign is the campaign that had the most volunteers, outraised everybody in money except Donald Trump, obviously, and had all this money, all these people, all this energy. And yet there were times, Melissa, when you guys did not have simple materials, simple leaflets to hand out. And you didn't have them for weeks. Can you tell me more about that? There's a picture here of the UPS guy who had supposedly, what happened? They missed the delivery?
I don't know, but all I remember is when we needed more materials and brochures, because we were canvassing. And when we go to a canvas, or when volunteers are canvassing and going door to door, we're supposed to leave something at the door to show that Bernie was there. In mid-January, I remember that was the first instance where we ran out in the LA office. We ran out of Spanish materials. So I remember we having to kind of bargain with other field organizers from other areas like Riverside, or I forget where we got the Spanish stuff. But we were like, oh, here, we'll give you some. I think it was from Northern California. We got a box of Spanish literature for us, just one, and so we split it up amongst a few of us. But we're waiting, and so when I asked questions like, where's the Spanish lit? And by the way, 2 weeks later, approximately, I think it was 2 weeks later, and we need it for the weekends because obviously that was the big push for canvassing.
Yeah.
Then we ran out of English materials, and there were we ran out of the generic English ones, and then there were the other specialized like labor ones or the student ones, but the ones that we were supposed to be giving out, we didn't have. So we had to make do. But then, and when I asked questions like, why don't we have the materials?
Yeah, we have that right here.
Yeah.
It seemed that you were gaslit. You said, what's the reason? This wasn't the first time you asked. I mean, this is after you asking several times.
Right. I finally had to put it in a group chat so
Yes.
other people could possibly respond. Maybe they had a clue about why we weren't getting materials. And I wasn't accusing anybody, but of course they took it as me accusing somebody. What I thought was astounding to me was that we weren't we were always being held accountable. They wanted to know how many volunteers we had, the names of everybody, how many phone calls we made, how many phone calls the volunteers made, and so on and so on. Lewis needed that for whatever reason, to show off, essentially, I think.
Right.
In any case, we were always held accountable. When I was sick, I was sick for a little bit. I was working from home. I had to account for everything that I did at home while I was working. And when I did account for all of that, I made a list. I sent out emails to 500 people, blah, blah, blah. I did all this stuff. Then I had my lunch, et cetera, et cetera. The response I got back was pretty much that doesn't count, because really the only thing that counted is what he wanted us all to be doing, which is phone calling. But in any case, when I asked the question about why is this happening, the people that he brought on basically started piling on to me and saying, what are you serious? Or no, he asked that, are you serious?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I am serious. Why don't we have the materials? I was one of the very few people that really was not afraid to speak out. And especially because this is about Bernie Sanders and I wanted to win so bad. And when I saw things going on, I tried to speak out as much as I could. I took a picture of the FedEx. When the FedEx guy kept trying to come and deliver stuff, and I think on that picture it says seven boxes, or there's just a lot. I think that was materials.
Yes.
That's why we didn't have materials, is because someone wasn't there to retrieve the materials. And then the other time that we ran out of materials, we really were running out. We had nothing for nobody. And guess where it was? It was all in Riverside. And did I send you a picture on that?
Yes, you sent a picture of all the materials all in Riverside. So they got delivered there. Why did they get delivered there?
I don't know. Have no fucking clue. So then they had to send. Now, how much time and energy did it take to send 3 people in some cars to come and go to Riverside and bring the stuff back? Shouldn't they have been working? Shouldn't they have been, organizing and building out their areas? No. So, but they had to go. Now they were paid to get, to do deliveries. I don't know why that went to Riverside. But also something that you said about all the, everything had to go through Lewis. At one point, he said, no, you're not allowed to do phone banks. You're not allowed to have phone banks at your house anymore. You're not allowed to have canvases. We're basically, consolidating the weekday canvases. That he didn't want those things to be happening. And I just could not understand why not, because we needed to build out. And at one point, they expected, and I don't know why this is, because I certainly wouldn't have run the campaign like this, but they expected people in, say, West Covina or Pasadena to all travel all the way over to, I don't know, East LA or, another priority event. And so they wanted us to cancel the events that we had set up. And remember one time I actually did, we were, asked by our field director to please cancel or consolidate your events. And I'm just like, how can I do that? I've been building out and making more events happen. Don't we have to canvas? Don't we have to phone bank and get people to our canvases? I don't get this. So I remember calling my captain and I said, look, I'm going to have to cancel yours. And he's like, why? And I'm like, I have no idea. It's just what they decided. It just felt like no rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
And, in the end, I actually called him back. And an hour later, I was like, you know what, just have it. You need to have it. This doesn't make any sense. Just because my area isn't considered a priority. And speaking of priority, I don't think they really wanted delegates. Maybe that wasn't the strategy. I don't know, but it didn't seem like they had delegates in all areas. They were just focusing on certain areas. But I wanted to do my job and I wanted to do it well, and I did. But it was hard to do under the circumstances. Yeah, it was
So
really, really hard to do my job.
and I feel, and I sympathize with you. I feel, I saw a little bit of that, a lot of that struggle, not just with you, but with other people that were field organizers. And then Melissa, it seemed like, unfortunately, you were right. We were right. When it came to the election time, you have some pictures here that we should show. You took it upon yourself to pretty much go to Pasadena City College. That line got about 3 hours. It was about 3 hours long. Just tell us more about your experience that day, because that's when they were like running around like chickens with their head cut off.
Yes, exactly. Finally, the big day came, and they were sorely unprepared, in my opinion. The campaign was. First of all, we were told that we were going to do poll watching. We didn't know what that meant. I was asking other field organizers, what does that mean? Where do we go? What do we do when we get there? No one had a fucking clue what that was. So on the day of, I reported for duty at where I was supposed to go, and there was a canvass happening. There were just 3 canvasses happening that day in all of LA County. In all of LA County, the morning of big day for voting, 3 canvases. Why weren't we having multiple canvases everywhere near polling centers and shoving people in to go vote? Right. Why wasn't that happening? But whatever. So there was this canvas. I arrived. I didn't see anybody canvassing really. One person showed up, but then again, I arrived late. So I was told, okay, you go, because by that time I was so fed up, frankly. I was super fed up. And actually, now that I think about it, the reason why I arrived late is because I wanted to stop by a couple of polling sites in my area. And I actually did. And I sent you a picture. I don't know if you have it, but of me I wanted to help the poll center director.
Mm-hmm.
Because basically people were taking their ballots and leaving with them.
Yep.
And so I helped make a sign for all 17 polling machines. Please leave your ballot, don't take the ballot.
Yeah, do not take your ballot. It goes back in the printer. So we ourselves, Jonny here, he had to literally stop a guy from leaving. And there weren't enough of the poll workers there, or they weren't paying attention, because where we went, they just weren't paying attention. And people, I heard stories, people walking out with their ballot. And the fact that there was no education on the campaign's part to educate you guys and they didn't want you guys to talk to volunteers about this either, about any of the election stuff, which I think would have helped out a lot in the confusion, especially because a lot of people that are first-time voters or like dealt with the provisionals and dealt with all of that were Bernie Sanders supporters.
Right. We had to basically make up on, like, my volunteers made up their own flyers because there was just not enough direction from the campaign. Like, what's the difference between conditional and provisional? What do they do? What if they don't get their ballot, vote by mail ballot by mail? What do they do? What should they do when they get there? I mean, it was a big black hole of information that we had to make do with till very late on, basically. Towards like 3 or 4 days before election day, then we got like a flyer to make copies of from Jarrell or Rafa, and I think it was Rafa, who wrote something up about what to do. But still, that still did not clarify what's the difference between conditional. Should they be asking for conditional? You know, let's not forget that in LA County, people were voting 11 days prior, 10 days prior. So there were already major instances of issues. And it was shocking to me that the campaign had no clue that was happening. And they were not preparing, neither myself as a field organizer, nor so that I can alert my volunteers to alert voters about how to behave and what to do, basically. So I can tell you more. So the reason why I was late to go to where I was supposed to report on voting day was because I went to check my local polling place in my district to just check it out, see what was going on. So that's why I was late, because I was making signs to help them do their job and make sure the vote got counted. So then, regardless of whether they not were voting for Bernie or not,
Exactly.
I just,
Yeah.
So anyway, I showed up, and I was told to go poll watch somewhere, and I'm like, all right. So I went over. It was in South Central, and I went in to observe. Well, I saw things that shouldn't have been happening. Like, I saw someone campaigning in line, getting signatures. I was barred from going into the voting area. They were claiming I was, quote, disturbing voters, but I wasn't. I merely asked a gentleman who was by that time outside the polling center, completely outside, like, why did you get a provisional ballot, sir? And because of that, because I was questioning their procedures, they called the police, and I nearly got arrested. Wow. Now, I wish that the campaign had properly trained us on what does it mean to poll watch. I did what I had to do at that point. I returned back to my area, and I went to poll watch in my area, and I saw mega lines, and it was very disconcerting. And so finally, I had a team of canvassers set up at Pasadena City College, because I thought the colleges and students were like, and the young vote, I thought that was the most important thing. And but the campaign really failed in that direction, in that department. Students, so many students would come up to us and say, oh, is today the day? Bernie supporters, is today the day to vote? We're like, yes. Not that that's the campaign's fault, but I'm just saying that the students needed the most hand holding through all of this, and that college preparation program really failed. So in any case, but I had a relationship with the students at that campus, and my volunteer crew in the Pasadena area was amazing. And so they took on, I asked them the night before, because we were doing some extreme late night canvassing. I asked them, hey, can you set up a table at the campus, and whenever there's a Bernie person, to please direct them over to the line. And there was this huge line, and I sent you a couple of pictures. It started in the daytime. I got a call around 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and they kept checking in with me. They said the line is getting to be super long. It's 2 hours, now it's 3 hours long. I couldn't believe it. So I drove over there, and we decided as a group, now this is without the Bernie campaign's direction, obviously without their direction. We decided to shuttle Bernie voters, from that location where there was this gigantic line to 2 other locations that were nearby that didn't have such a line. And of course, we know that the line was there because the e-poll books, when you check in, those things were not working. People were not found in the system. They were handed provisional ballots, but mostly they didn't have enough staff, and so on. So that's what happened. It was extremely disconcerting. And it was last minute. And then like around 7 o'clock at night, maybe 6 o'clock at night, the Bernie campaign, because we were alerting each other, we were alerting each other to all the issues happening throughout all of LA County on this day. And we were communicating those issues on a chat group. And somehow someone saw that and then sent some volunteers to Pasadena City College. But this is like at 7 o'clock at night. I'm like, now
where were you 5 hours ago? Right.
And so, the campaign did not have anything really set up to deal with this. There was no intake form. Like I said, I think I set up an intake form because I knew, and I put that on our homegrown flyers that we did for my area. I said, if you have any problems, please use this intake form and let us know what's going on where. There was no intake form like that from the campaign. The only thing, like this was like 2 days before, the campaign had a last minute 20-minute phone call, which they called, at 3:30 for 4 o'clock. I'm like, and this is like 2 days before Super Tuesday, and we're super busy in the middle of the weekend and whatnot. And so we got on the phone, And it was pretty much someone was now made a legal coordinator, and she had the plan. And so this was the plan. When and if there was a problem at a polling place, just send an email to Danny or Lewis. That was the plan.
That was the plan. So
Yeah.
I just have a question though, as we start wrapping it up.
Yeah.
How does it make you feel when people, when, you know, we had the, what is it, the debate watch party, you were there, and not the debate watch party, I'm sorry, the election party that night at this club. And a lot of people were thanking Lewis, were thanking Danny. You know, they got all the glory. Even now, people like Chuck Rocha and all these people that worked, you know, I'm not saying unions are bad, but the bosses of the union sometimes operate in a certain way that is very much like this campaign operated. And they're getting all the glory. They're being told, you won California. You know, Rafa got the Latino vote for California. Danny won California. And Lewis, they got LA. You know, they got LA. They got Southern California. How does that make you feel as a field organizer who saw, like, who was really doing the brunt of the work?
Well, that's an interesting question. Personally, I think as an organizer or just as myself, I am not a person that needs praise, and I'm actually more of a very shy person. That I'd like to do things behind the scenes. I don't want to, I don't want to be in the front really. But so that's not that important to me. So I don't care if someone else wants to take the praise, go for it. I don't give a shit. The problem though is when I found, like, I knew, okay, great, we won California. By the way, I didn't feel like we won. We should have done way better, considering what I saw and how that operation was run, lack of super disorganized, et cetera, et cetera. I think we should have done way better. In any case, we won. So when they get the kudos, that meant, and here's what I didn't like about that, was that meant that they were going to get future jobs and opportunities, and they immediately got redeployed. Not everybody, but Lewis and I think some of the other ones in California got sent over to New York. And I was like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
If that's going to happen in New York, we're fucking, I mean, maybe they would win something in New York. I don't know. But I just was like, oh God, I hope that, that doesn't go bad. But that's what happened. And so that's how I felt when they got they got the praise for winning California. I felt like disappointed that now they're going to go to New York.
Yeah, because that's not a good thing if they were ineffective.
And also, months later now, I found out that Lewis and Danny have started a PAC. And so there you go. It's like they're going to continue reaping the benefits of having worked on this campaign. Will they be successful in their PAC? I don't know. I don't care. What I do care about, though, is really that they do not exploit Bernie people. They do not, tout that all the work that they did, and I don't care for lip service, because that's what we got all the time on conference calls. Let's give a shout out. Let's lift up this person and that person on these phone calls with each other. It was meaningless to me anyway. Some people need that, and I think it's good. But oftentimes Lewis would just shout out and lift up his higher ups. He would just kiss ass. It was like, the last phone call we had with all the organizers in California, and he wants to make a special mention to Danny and Rafa, and it's just like, are you fucking kidding me?
Right.
In any case, I see now very heavily on Facebook that he is shouting out and saying wonderful things about people, including myself, including people that he screwed over. Cover his ass, saying nice things now. That it's not going to get him anywhere, and people need to really understand what it's like to work under Lewis Myers. I mean, hostile work environment is abusive, and I think more things are going to be coming out.
Yeah.
I'm happy to share my union complaint that I filed. I'm an open book, so if anybody wants more info, they need to know what they're getting when they hire them. Period.
Yeah.
Or work for them.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just a hostile environment, and obviously unfortunate for you guys. It's also the fact that they were representing the Bernie Sanders campaign, and the Bernie Sanders campaign is all about inclusivity, promoting acceptance, unity, positivity, love. Like, that's what compassion, that's what Bernie Sanders stands for. And it just seemed in a lot of the states, it seemed like these campaigns stood for the opposite and made people feel Bernie people who are, who do encompass a lot of those things, feel trapped and like they couldn't speak out. And as far as the where we go from here, the delegate situation, can you give a little bit of information about that? Because you told me that the campaign only wanted Bernie delegates to be in agreement with the campaign, as far as like not be too vocal about any issue, to pretty much be quiet and like follow the vision more than anything of the campaign.
Yeah, again, fall in line. I was a Bernie delegate in 2016, and that was the complete opposite. I was not only a Bernie delegate, I was the whip for Southern California, one of, I guess, 4 or 5 whips in all of the state for us, which we self-selected, self-elected, because back then the Bernie campaign also was not really, at that point, was not directing the delegates. Like, we didn't know what we were supposed to do when we got there.
Yep.
So we self-selected, and I was a whip. And gosh, I lost my train of thought. Being a delegate, yeah. So we basically protested, and everything that happened was because of the Bernie delegates that just put their heart and soul into that convention. Well, now what I'm finding out is that the campaign has certain vetting mechanisms, and I'm not really clear what they are. And in effect, the campaign is no longer a campaign. So who exactly is vetting, and what are they vetting based on? That's a whole shroud of secrecy, again, as usual, just like there was a shroud of secrecy about getting redeployed to different states. We had no job security in terms of what's it going to take to go to another state, and that's why people were afraid to speak out. So now I see that shroud of secrecy again about what is it going to take. And so I happened to be on a phone call. This was one of the last phone calls in our group in the California field organization, and Rafa said someone asked, like, what about delegates? Like, yeah, don't think that this was actually a talking point, or this was on their agenda, because basically one of the Orange County or Southern San Diego field organizers asked about this. What about delegates? And so he said, well, we want, you're going to have to follow, I forgot what the exact words were now, but you cannot disrupt, no protesting, and you basically have to follow commands based on what the campaign, i.e. Bernie Sanders or the campaign, wants. So that's it. That's what they're looking for.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, again, Bernie Sanders is a guy who disrupted the status quo, who disrupted the establishment, and who was, a protester. He walked so many picket lines. He was marching, and just to have that sort of sentiment towards your delegates. And also, I don't think the campaign delegates were elected through a caucus. Now, do you plan on continuing to maybe run as a delegate, or what's your...
I put my name in the hat because why not? Will I be picked? Who knows? I'm obviously not the kind that's not going to speak out. So if I see something going on that I disagree with, I will speak out. And that's what you're going to get when you get me, period. So if they don't want me, I don't know, but maybe the people will. I'm going to be elected by the voters in my district. Again, it's not clear when, where, in this time frame exactly. Who knows? But if I get it, fine, we'll see. But
Well, Melissa, thank you so much for all this information. I'm going to be reporting on a lot of this throughout the week because there's so many people that want to talk about, what happened, like what they felt and all of these things. And I know, and I want to thank you personally because I did see the hard work you did. You were in my district, Congressional District 27, and it went for Bernie. And I saw Bernie sign after Bernie sign after Bernie sign, the signs that you provided, not the campaign. Things like that. There wasn't the infrastructure of support, not just for you guys, but also for the volunteers. The grassroots felt pushed away. And I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about that. And I'm going to post that letter on my social media page so you guys can all read it and kind of get where the LA grassroots was coming from in terms of pretty much supporting everything and corroborating everything Melissa said, and so many things that more and more people are coming to light. This isn't to bash Bernie Sanders. Again, the whole point of this discussion was to give you insight as to how willing all these people were to completely take all of this mistreatment from these people who were working for Bernie and were willing to do it because they wanted Bernie to win, regardless of how they felt. I know some other field organizers who cried a lot of the time that when they went to work. And it's really unfortunate that this is how we have to have accountability, but there needs to be some accountability so this doesn't happen again. So these people don't go on to get jobs and, for progressive Congress people or whoever's running again. And so we learn from our mistakes and we do things differently the next time we're running a progressive presidential candidate. So we vet people more efficiently. And, while Bernie Sanders isn't to blame for all of this because it was a huge campaign and there was no way he was going to be able to do it all, there are people that I'm going to be pretty much focusing on in the next coming days as to why these people are problematic, who they are, and how, in what ways they were problematic. So again, Melissa, thank you very much for being here. Jonny, do we have any super chats? Okay, we're just going to read some super chats. You want me to read them? Okay. Let's see.
Real quick, Melissa, what's that picture you sent us of this, the black box being opened?
Yeah. Can you hear me right now or no?
No.
Okay, let me put my earbuds in. I think I just lost the battery. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, that box was that was just one example of what was going on in LA County. In South Central, they were actually opening up the voting ballot box and putting things in it, putting the ballots in it. And that's illegal. You're not supposed to open up the ballot box. I forgot why I threw that in there, but it's just an example of what was going on in LA County.
Well, because Lewis and all them, and Daniel Andalon, they're not talking about this. They're not bringing this stuff up.
Yeah, they're not talking about election integrity.
No.
Yeah. It's interesting because we tried to warn the campaign. Pasta directly asked a question to Rafa, and we have that on video, and he completely dismissed him. So did Jeff Weber. Jeff Weber is, of course, responsible for a lot of these hires at the state level and the national level. So it's really interesting to see the lack of preparation for Election Day. And you witnessed it. You were there to what happened before and then what happened the day of and then what happened after. And, and I think she put a picture in there of everybody asking for Dean Logan's resignation.
Right. We had some protests, but that was after the campaign completely ended in California. And many of us activists went there demanding for his resignation. But let's not forget that in January, mid-January, and I mentioned this earlier today, I just want to reiterate now for anybody else watching that Shelley Jackson, Jarrell, they all called us conspiracy theorists. That's just a conspiracy. That we don't need to worry about anything happening on Election Day because we have lawyers, they'll deal with that. And actually, I believe I sent you a couple of other things towards the bottom there of me. This is after the campaign has ended. I'm no longer paid. Several of us were very concerned about going after more ballots, like if there were any other issues that we could help out with, signatures ballots matching and whatnot. Yeah. And so I reached out to Lewis and I asked him, and he said, "Oh, I'll let you know." I never heard back. I don't know. It just didn't seem like the campaign was interested in going after more ballots. They're not interested in fighting election integrity. It's the same thing that happened last time, honestly, in 2016.
Yeah. Well,
and if anything is gonna happen in our movement, it doesn't matter. And many people.
Nope, we lost you.
Oh, we lost you.
My earbuds are no good.
Okay, yeah, we can hear you.
All right.
You're good. We can hear you.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So anyway, it doesn't matter what we do on the ground. It doesn't matter. And nothing matters when you go to the day for voting day. If people aren't allowed or able to vote,
Thank you.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Doesn't matter. All the hard work.
If the campaign, whatever next campaigns there are, if they don't take this seriously, or if this doesn't get fixed before that, we're never going to win.
Yeah. Thank you for leaving us with that point. I have, you want to read them?
Yeah, I got a couple super chats. Okay, so Qualderline says, it looked to me like they hired managers who were paid to bungle the campaign. It was a set of imported clowns.
Agreed.
I've heard that before.
David Crow, thanks, Melissa. Love to all of you.
Aw, hi, David.
David, hey.
Manitalk, Bernie Feist and his staff knew all along to lose. Keith Anthony Sakura, Combo Couch, thank you for all your hard work, as what happened here in California was/is something that def needed to be said, even as ugly as it is. Keep kicking ass, fam lambs.
Thank you, fam.
Snorky Y2K, need to get Misty Rebecca from Iowa with Melissa.
Sure.
Ooh. Give me their contact.
And then thank you, Jim Garrison, for the super chat.
Thank you guys all for the super chats. I appreciate you guys paying attention to this. There's going to be, like I said, a lot of these things coming out. It's important, and it's not just because I want to draw attention or any of these people really want to say. It's tough to say. I mean, it's tough for me personally as a Sanders supporter. It was tough to watch all this happen and you know, like really like sit on it and not be able to really like say anything, and it was just rough. And then it just got really, really bad. We can learn from our mistakes and not do this again. I mean, similar things happened in 2016. This time it seemed even worse by certain parts. You know, we need to remember, if we're running campaigns as progressives, you need to make sure that they're run bottom up. They're run with inclusivity of the grassroots. The moment you stop listening to the grassroots is the moment you make the turn for the worse. So just keep that in mind. And, you know, I thank all the Bernie people, all the Bernie volunteers, all the field organizers, all the supporters. You know, they worked so hard to get Bernie a win here in California, but abroad as well. And they managed to do that in spite of the bullshit they were dealing with, in spite of the election issues that we had. They still managed to win this for Bernie. And that shows you just how hard they worked. And they won it, not the establishment people in charge. So just wanted to say that, guys. Thanks for watching, guys. Convo out. Bye.
Bye.